internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan.
Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Brought to you by
Some things are perfect from the start. Smirnoff.
Tonight, Jamaica's latest confidence survey shows a country in recovery, but not a country at ease. Consumers are feeling better than they did in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. Businesses are not. And the question tonight is whether that March data has already been overtaken by events. Because since that survey window closed, the global oil shock linked to the war in Iran has deepened. And here at home, the Mining and Quarrying Association is now warning that higher energy costs could push up the price of key construction materials. So, what exactly does confidence mean in an economy still trying to rebuild? Then Parliament has approved new casino regulations. The government says the framework has safeguards. Supporters say it could bring them jobs, tourism spending, and investment. Critics, though, want to know whether the benefits will actually reach ordinary Jamaicans or whether the social costs may arrive faster than the money. And later in our top 3 global stories, a police officer is killed inside a station in Trinidad and Tobago. The United States extends its ceasefire with Iran, and a new artificial intelligence system so powerful its creators have refused to release it to the public. I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Stories Global Lead. Jamaica's latest business and consumer confidence survey shows a mixed picture. Consumer confidence rose in the first quarter. Business confidence fell. That split may tell us something important. Households may be responding to the fact that the worst of the immediate Melissa shock has passed. Businesses, however, may already be looking at the longer bill. Weaker profits, higher costs, and recovery that's proving slower and more expensive than many had hoped. But there's another complication in a survey like this, which covers January to March. We're talking about it in April, and it does not fully capture the April shocks, the oil market dislocation linked to Iran, or the warning that rising fuel and energy costs could now push up the price of construction materials, just as Jamaica is still rebuilding. Don Anderson is the Managing Director of Market Research Services and the pollster who carried out this survey. He joins us now. Thanks so much for joining us, Don Anderson. Don Anderson, hi, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Anderson. All right, we're making sure that Don Anderson is continuing to be with us as we have this conversation tonight, because if we are going to look at the global impacts of the war in Iran as well as what's going on with the United States and Israel. A continued set of strikes there. Word just in from President Donald Trump that a ceasefire that should have ended today at 7 will now be extended. It had been extended from today to tomorrow. He says he'll extend it further. But looking now at what Jamaica is going to be doing, we have data, information here on the ground from the January to March period, not only about how persons felt at the end of March, given that we had this war start on February 28, but also how they were dealing in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. Are businesses feeling more confident? The survey results say no. Are consumers feeling more confident? The survey said yes. But today, as at April 21, is that still the position and the situation? They might have seen October as Hurricane Melissa passed over Jamaica, the joint record holder for the most powerful Atlantic hurricane. We've been told that by World Meteorological Center. But instead, come January, businesses might have had a different expectation completely, looking at the first quarter of the year with cynicism, while consumers may have had a different look. Now, Don Anderson, a pollster who has done these polls for years, is not only going to be able to share with us what this poll result says, but also can give us historical data, because we would have had data after Hurricane Beryl, not as serious, and we would also have had data during COVID-19, showing us what shocks the Jamaican economy due to business confidence and to consumer confidence as well. Now, we're waiting for Don Anderson to rejoin us inside the program. Don Anderson, you with us?
Yeah, man. I'm with you.
Glad to have you. Yes, hearing you clearly now. Glad to have you with us as you talk to us about the latest business and consumer confidence survey. Mr. Anderson, we saw the blurb around it. We saw some information around it showing consumer confidence is up by 5.7%. But that confidence still has not returned to where it was before Hurricane Melissa. Based on the data that you've seen, are Jamaicans genuinely more optimistic, or are they just simply less traumatized than they were before?
No, I think that is a question of greater optimism, because they went to such a low in terms of confidence during the Melissa and after Melissa that any little movement upwards is obviously going to be something that is noticed. The movement was about 5.6 percentage points, not great, but the bottom line is that, people are feeling a little bit better about where they are now compared to where they were right after Melissa and for the next 2 months after Melissa. So this upward movement is a very good sign, but I make note of the fact that it is not anywhere back to what it was first quarter of 2025. So it's really digging out of a deep hole, so to speak.
Boy, let's look, though, at the consumers now, because weirdly enough, the consumers are feeling a little bit better. But when we look at the consumers, they're supporting businesses. And while those businesses don't seem to feel very supported, business confidence fell 6.5% in the same quarter where those consumers you just spoke to us about, digging themselves out of that hole, have improved. You've said before, and you said it here, that businesses think longer term. What specifically are you seeing Jamaican businesses pricing into their outlook that ordinary consumers aren't yet seeing?
Well, you've actually answered the question, because businesses tend to take a very long-term view, obviously because they're there for the long haul. Remember, consumers tend to have a knee-jerk reaction to price increases and to challenges. Tomorrow they have to go into the supermarket or grocery store to buy something, and therefore they're looking at it right in front of their faces. Businesses, of course, on the other hand, tend to look down the road. They're in there for the longer haul. And what the businesses are saying is that we've had challenges, we still continue to have challenges. Right now we aren't feeling very positive about the economy, and in fact we are not confident about the situation right now. So business confidence fell by 6 percentage points. Whereas the consumers, as we made the point already, they're saying, well, I think I've seen things happening around me. I'm not back to where I was before, but I see things happening. Buildings are going back up, roofs are going back on. Maybe there are even some jobs available. So consumers are saying we're a little bit more confident than we were in the last quarter during Melissa, but they're not anywhere nearer. We wouldn't want to take away that business is booming. Our consumers are very confident. They're simply not as without confidence as they were before during Melissa.
And that is certainly something that businesses don't have to deal with. This longer term view, as you said, allowing them to make these sorts of decisions versus what you've called a knee-jerk reaction that we might see with consumers. But these businesses are also dealing with what could be argued to be shock after shock after shock. Yes. They've absorbed multiple external shocks in recent years. The pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war, Melissa, now Iran, and the oil spikes. Help them out. What's structurally different about Jamaica's vulnerability in this period that you would have seen compared to those earlier previous shocks?
I don't think there's anything different, really. The bottom line is one of the questions that we asked in the survey was the ability to withstand these kinds of challenges. And a lot of persons, both consumers and businesses, don't feel that we're necessarily built for resilient response to these factors. So when they hit us, we do have major problems, as we did during Melissa and after, and during, Beryl and after, and so on. So that businesses are, as you rightly say, reeling from a number of shocks which have come one after the other, maybe spaced out a little bit. But by the time they begin to recover from one, COVID, then we have Beryl, then we have now Melissa. It's a challenge for businesses, but they're saying we're in there for the long haul. We have to withstand this kind of battering that we're taking. It's going to take us a while, but the bottom line is we're here. Consumers, on the other hand, tend to despair, because they're saying, God, how am I going to buy the bread tomorrow that I need to feed a family of 5? And that's the difference in the perception and the way that businesses look at it from consumers look at it.
Give us now a broad view, because this survey covers January through March of this year. Since then, we've had lots of things happen. The Mining and Quarrying Association of Jamaica has warned of rising costs for limestone and sand, construction material. The Iran conflict has pushed fuel prices towards levels we haven't seen since 2008. The energy minister has raised the possibility of movement restrictions if pressures intensify. And we've had groups come on this show telling us if they're for or against that. Is any of that in your data just yet? And if it's not, how significantly does that lag distort the picture that the survey paints for policymakers tonight?
Well, when we take into consideration that the first strikes in the war in Iran were about late February, so we're picking up a little bit of what's taking place down in Iran with the war with the US and Israel. We're taking some of that. So we're beginning to feel the effect of rising oil prices. And already businesses are saying we expect, 92% of the businesses say we expect prices to go up. And therefore, we're I don't want to say intrigued, but we are anticipating what will come back to us when we continue our field work on the second quarter, which we have already started. And therefore, we expect to see some major challenges for businesses, and one would therefore wonder how long the consumers will continue on this path of confidence if businesses now have to pass on these prices to consumers, and they will be faced with making quick decisions on the basis of increased prices, which everybody anticipates. The consumers also expect prices to go up.
Yes.
They said that over last year, and 90% of them said prices went up.
And we're seeing an increase in prices thanks to the Petrojam pricing policy changing on Thursday of this week. So it'd be really interesting then to see what your new data shows. Managing Director of Market Research Services, Don Anderson, thank you so very much for joining us inside Lead Story.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a break and come back to you. We now have casino regulations passed by the Senate on Friday. Could this be Jamaica's key moneymaker? We'll talk about that next.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The time by the Office of the Prime Minister is...
me and the stylist, no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress, no charge me to sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early? But Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people them I say we are mash up the dance. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't fit it dark. Shine your lights
Parliament just approved, or rather, Senate just approved the Jamaica gambling regulation, the Casino Gaming General Regulations 2025 last Friday. A mouthful for many of us, but they were drafted under Section 72 of the Casino Gaming Act. They established the operational framework for what the government has described as integrated resort development. A model where casino gaming is embedded within luxury resort complexes, not accessible from the street. The first casino is anticipated within the Princess Resort development. The government says the casino gaming regulations are about responsible growth. Language from the Senate has been careful. Safeguard the integrity of casino operations, protect Jamaica's reputation, comply with international financial crime standards, and build a model in which gaming sits inside a broader integrated resort experience rather than a standalone walk-in casino. But opposition Senator Alan Bernard raised a question the regulations do not fully answer. When beaches, entertainment, commerce and casino gaming are all consolidated within a privately controlled resort enclave, who is actually developing Jamaica? Joining us to talk about this now is Deputy President of the Senate, Charles Sinclair. Good evening, and thank you so much for being with us inside Lead Stories Global Lead.
Yes, good evening, and good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Of course, thanks so much for joining us, Senator. What exactly did the Senate approve last Friday, and why was this an important step right now?
All right. Last Friday, the Casino Gaming General Regulations 2025 was approved, and that is the regulations which will operationalize the Casino Gaming Act. The Casino Gaming Act, as persons would know, was passed in 2010. It has taken quite some time for the regulations to be done. But
15 years, Senator? My!
Well, it obviously had to be given careful thought and consideration, and obviously consultation to look on other countries that have implemented and how they have implemented and the rules under which they would have governed their casino operations. Deep review and considerations being given will take some time. In addition to that, the model that we are seeking to implement in Jamaica, which is the integrated resort development model, which is consistent with other of our regional partners across the Caribbean, where the casinos are integrated into a hotel development. All right, it's something that had to be considered. The legislation in relation to that had to be reviewed. There were amendments that were made in that regard. Obviously, again, following on consultations, and to set the standard that is required, because as you know, the persons who can apply for casinos in this model would be having to bring to Jamaica an investment in the tune of $100 million, United States dollars, that is. So it is something that had to be implemented in a very cautious way to ensure that we get it right when it comes into action.
I think that's so important that you talked about Jamaica getting it right. 16 years, more than 15 years of looking at these regulations. We now have it passed in the Senate. But the government says that you did take the time to get it right, that there are real safeguards here. What are the main protections that Parliament believes the public should know about?
All right, so let me start. You know the history of Jamaica. There has been diverse views in relation to casinos. And as I said, we have to get it right. There are also, to get the public along and to have a different view as to casinos is something that we have to look at. You know, it is trying to diversify the tourism product. That's a model that we are adopting, not a standalone casino operation, which would allow persons to walk in off the street. So that is part of what will provide a layer of protection to Jamaicans. You don't walk into a casino and to participate in the process.
Some
But
here
when you
layer
look
of
at
protection, Senator Sinclair. Others here discrimination for Jamaicans not to be able to participate in this thing. How do you allow for this discussion about access for ordinary Jamaicans who are not resort guests to be able to participate in this? Are we then being excluded from this casino framework on our own island?
No, I wouldn't say we have not gone to the extent that you would have seen in the Bahamas. In the Bahamas, the locals are barred from participating in casino activity. In Jamaica, once you're a guest, and you can be a guest in different ways by virtue of being a person who will be there for a longer period of time. You may be a guest who is there on a day pass, right? Which does make it somewhat accessible, but you don't want a situation where persons can just walk in off the street. That is something that we have to guard against. There are negatives to casino gaming, and the studies that have been done even by our University of the West Indies looked on the net gains, the net positives that we can get out of casino gaming. It looked on what are the challenges, social and economic challenges. And when all was considered, the general consensus out of the University of the West Indies, and I will just give a quote that came from that study, which says the gaming subsector can make an important contribution to the Jamaican economy. When casino gambling is associated with large inflow of tourists, the net benefits tend to exceed net social and economic costs. So from the study done, and the study would have looked on various countries, including Jamaica, other countries in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, the Bahamas, and also places within the United States, looked on what would be the best model. This is what we came out with.
Well,
it has not gone to the extent as exists in the Bahamas.
Where it limits people from coming in at all. But you also had a discussion that took place on the Senate floor with Senator Alan Bernard, raising concerns about that integrated resort model, saying that it created a closed loop tourism ecosystem, that within these private coastal enclaves, the small man, the fisherman, the vendor, the youth entrepreneur does not enter as owner if he's able to go in there, but he's entering as a low-wage worker or a spectator. What's the Senate's formal answer to that characterization, not only for Senator Bernard, but for the rest of the nation?
Well, I look on it in a broader way than the blinkered way in which Senator Bernard would have looked at it. Now, first of all, with the investment that is anticipated and which has already started, because you made reference to the Princess Hotel, what we are deriving a significant benefit. If we start from the construction phase, right? You have significant employment opportunities for persons in the construction phase of the developments that will come by virtue of this investment that comes with these integrated resorts, right? You take it beyond that you're looking at a higher end tourism activity where the persons who will work in these particular facilities that encourage casino gaming, the wage benefits can be much higher than what one would generally find.
So they come in as workers in this.
You take it beyond that, because when you look on, if we are able to attract by virtue of the diversification, more guests, more visitors to our island, which is something that is anticipated, we can see improvements in respect to the revenues from the Tourism Enhancement Fund. And I don't think how we sell the Tourism Enhancement Fund is coming out absolutely right, to let persons know the benefits that our communities and lower income communities to a large extent derive from the Tourism
We have the
Enhancement
benefit
Fund.
of just having had the CEO of the Tourism Enhancement Fund inside Lead Story last week. And so my audience has a better appreciation of the diversity of things that the Tourism Enhancement Fund does. But for those who are listening to you, have that visceral reaction to the word casino and see the potential for social ills. Singapore, one of the countries with a casino model, has seen an increase in gambling in its population, even though it isn't expecting people to come off the streets. Macau, another tourist destination, also has seen an increase in gambling. There are accompanying social ills. What do you say to those people who say Jamaica maybe can't deal with that right now?
Well, and that is something that I said that was looked at in the studies. It's looked on by the government of Jamaica under Andrew Holness, and the model that we have adopted is something that will provide, as I said, that first layer, that it is not a free-for-all, it is not open to just total and free access. All right? So the integrated resort model does provide that layer. But beyond that, there are several other protections within the legislation itself. But before I get to legislation...
Well, we're completely out of time, Senator Sinclair.
Yes? Pardon me?
We're completely out of time.
So quickly?
It's a fun conversation, Senator. So clearly, sensitization around this piece of legislation, especially since the Act had been passed 16 years ago. We now have the regulations going before Senate and being passed there. And with the protections in place, that would be really important for Jamaicans to better understand and appreciate what it brings.
And the education that has to come as we develop the product, right?
Important
there has to be a lot of education that will ensure that we understand, everybody is on board, understand what is being done, and all the protections that exist to preserve our population.
I think that's so important, and especially as we're hoping to see the benefits, this conversation is going to need to be expanded. Senator Charles Sinclair, President of Jamaica's Senate, thank you so very much for joining us inside Lead Stories Global Lead.
All right, thank you for having me.
Of course. After the break, we put the international record on the table. What other jurisdictions have gained from casinos, and what have they had to pay for? We'll talk about that next inside Lead Stories Global Lead.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Jamaica. Make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
What a guan? What a guan?
That a guan pa.
What a guan? What a guan?
What a One. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
That's a guan pa. What a guan?
Brought to you by
Some things are perfect from the start. Smirnoff.
Casinos are often marketed as a shortcut to tourism growth. However, you are watching sometimes them leading to foreign exchange and urban development. And in the times that they do, they often deliver large revenues. But internationally, the record is mixed. Singapore built a high-control model with strong social safeguards, including entry levies for its own citizens and permanent residents. Macau generated enormous revenue, but also became deeply dependent on gaming. So the policy question for Jamaica is not whether casinos can make money. Of course they can. But the real question is whether they create broad-based development or whether they produce a more narrow stream of benefits while leaving the state to manage the downside. And we are looking now at countries similar to ours. Singapore approving its own integrated resort framework in 2005. Its first casino opened in 2010. By 2013, the two casinos were generating approximately $4.4 billion gross gaming revenue annually. But here's what Singapore also learned, that within the first 5 years, problem gambling cases rose by 60%. The standardized problem gambling rate among Singaporeans stands at 3.8% of the population. In Macau, it's 6%. So with all that it is that we have right now, it has to be a considered conversation, not only about an act that is now 16 years out of date, but regulations that have seen a changing world, and a changing world that we're hoping to have come to Jamaica, even as we see higher oil prices, a changing global economy, the ills of gambling and gaming in other jurisdictions, and the hope that Jamaicans can meaningfully develop from a model that does not allow them to walk into the resorts, and a discussion about whether that is perhaps the best way to protect our own citizens, or an exclusionary model that some have argued allows for us to be outside of some of the very best of Jamaican life. Now, in a few moments, we're going to be joined by economist Janelle McEwen as he speaks to us about some of the benefits that we can be anticipating and expecting, but also some of the real risks, especially as Jamaica attempts to diversify. Because Jamaica, an economy heavily dependent on agriculture and tourism, is expanding into gaming. But it's expanding into gaming as part of tourism. And if global tourism collapses in the same way that we unfortunately saw during the global pandemic, and now with oil prices escalating, meaning that we're already seeing airlines indicate that they either need government bailouts, as we have seen with Spirit Airlines in the United States, airlines asking for consolidation, United Airlines and American Airlines, or airlines under pressure, like our local Caribbean airlines, we are seeing then getting those tourists to another destination. As oil prices and jet A fuel increase is going to be more and more complicated. The expansion then of tourism, as we're hoping to de-risk from being so heavily dependent upon tourism, is going to have to be a conversation that we as a nation engage in. And especially as we're looking to see the kind of gains that Singapore had received and recognized that we can also be part not only of the benefits, but take a look and see if we can mitigate some of those harms. With us now, we have economist Janelle McEwen to help us better appreciate and understand what exactly we're looking at as we move into gaming. Janelle, welcome to Lead Story. Thanks so much for joining us.
Evening. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you with us. So when countries introduce casinos, Janelle, what's the most common gap between the promise, the sexy, glittery lights, the people shuffling cards like you see on TV, and the actual result, the money that people are expecting, the kind of community that they're expecting, and some of the social harms that are often spoken about in advance?
Well, we can start on the point that Donna Scott Motley mentioned about it, that our young people are really, the addiction levels as it relates to gambling, and it's alarmingly, it's a problem to moderately, and it's around 13%, which is considerably high. So yes, that is a major issue as it relates to that. And another issue is that when we seek to gain benefit from these casinos or gaming, etc., yes, they're normally tax high, but most of these things are what we call tax, probably gambling, leading towards person losing their house or whatever. So it's like in Las Vegas, and you always hear people say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. However, for this gambling, for this casino legislation that has been passed now, along with the integrated resort development, this license that will be issued along that part will be just a few of them. It will be started with Princess Grand Jamaica. And what is happening with this, what you're hearing some of the pushback is that it's like we're creating this confined place, and it's inclusive, and everything is just happening there. So it's like this place where everything is happening, and everything is happening in a concentrated area, and we understand the issues as it relates to the benefits passing on to regular Jamaicans. When we have all-inclusive resorts, we started in the 80s and the 90s, compared to now, how much have we improved from a lower level standpoint? How do these people who are around the resort, the employees, the fishermen, how do they, or the fishermen, benefit from all that is happening within this?
I think that is one big question that we have heard from the opposition. I spoke with a few moments ago, Deputy President of the Senate, Charles Sinclair, who said, listen, there are spaces for persons, Jamaicans, to be involved in this system. But I did reference what Senator Alan Bernard said, which is this integrated resort model that we are talking about here puts behind the walls of hotels, the beaches, and now this exciting casino. Senator Sinclair is saying you can get a day pass as a Jamaican citizen to be there. But that idea that Jamaican citizens can enter seems to be those who can afford a day pass. And we have other jurisdictions that we can compare ourselves to, like Singapore. Singapore charges nationals a mandatory entry levy, 100 Singapore dollars per day or $2,000 annually as a deliberate deterrent to local gambling. You can't afford it, don't go in. And if you can't afford to lose anything, you can't afford to go in. Jamaica's regulations don't appear to contain an equivalent mechanism. So is that a gap? And does that evidence, when it say that this is actually a deterrent, or are we just saying those who can afford it can frolic?
No, well, the concerns are valid, and it's a healthy debate, and it's necessary. But when you look at, for example, the agro-linkages exchange within tourism, for example, you see that climbed over $1 billion of recent. And one of the issues is that I personally have is that the retention of funds from these entities, it has increased around 40%, but still more needs to be done. So yes, these kind of development, for example, a resort like Princess would have offered a significant amount of employment in itself, but the tourism industry, one must agree that would have made great strides in offering, for example, pension benefits that will become mandatory for almost every tourism employee. So that is also a step in the right direction. So this will create a lot of employment, and it should also increase what I believe is that what we call foreign to hotel sales, which I just mentioned would have climbed over $1 billion. So yes, there are concerns, and that's fine. So and again, I agree with Senator Bernard that yes, as it relates to getting shut out, and given that we have a national beach policy now, with many have shared their fair amount of criticism about, it is interesting that and it is necessary rather for us to have the conversation regarding that, because we understand the situation surrounding our beaches and what we call free access to, which is approximately 0.6%, which is almost equivalent to around 5.
Well, that is very controversial with the Jamaica Birthright Beach movement saying that's a small number. Others saying there are far more beaches that are accessible. A big back and forth as to what accessible and free means, especially in the context of persons then charging levies, legitimate or not, at the entrance and access points to these beaches. So that then beach conversation is one that directly ties to this conversation about gambling and gaming, and this inclusive model now that is divorcing itself from the Jamaican populace. Let me turn now though to another thing. As an economist, people want to know where the money is. And we're watching to see now, when we have this piece of legislation passed in 2010, regulations now passed in the Senate, when we can look to see some money. Singapore passed theirs, or had their first casino open in 2010. They didn't have any meaningful fiscal accounting until 2013. What's a credible timeline for Jamaica to say, all right, it's starting to work now, we're starting to see money from something like this?
Right, so it's Princess Grand Jamaica would have already opened, so we should see that integrating very soon. And again, casino is a very lucrative market, so that means we're bringing in a set of high-end or premium kind of tourists here, which will spend a lot of money that we're betting on. We're also assuming and anticipating that another license will be given to that of Hard Rock, which is a very prominent resort, and possibly, and which will definitely be the Harmonica, which will be along the coast of down there, which is a multi-billion US billion-dollar project. So we should be experiencing some of the gains in very recent times. As I said, Princess Resort would have already opened in Hanover, Green Island. So that particular, we should be seeing that now very soon. So the benefits will be there. As I said, we would have seen where the growing amount of hotels being open would have increased our agro-linkages exchange, that is farm to hotel sales, and that is climbing over $1 billion, which is significant. And as I will continue to make mention that it's just that we need to still prove these policies in helping to ensure that more is done for our local citizens, more is done for our communities.
Yes.
How to diversify such policy to even land.
And I think it's so important that you've highlighted that need for diversification as well, something that as we expand our tourism product, it is important for us to see if we can have more and more diversity in Jamaica's offerings. Economist Janelle McEwen, thank you so much for joining us inside Lead Stories Global Lead. When we return, our top 3 global stories. A police officer killed inside a station in Trinidad and Tobago. The latest turn in the U.S.-Iran ceasefire, and why artificial intelligence is now under scrutiny, perhaps taking over your computer next. Stay with us.
We want a piece for Jamaica. No, brother, no.
You don't see you ever play ref? Dirty game, no play.
But I ball game. No, I said, place you come from, brother, I want to live good, man. I want to live good, brethren. No shake hand, I can play a little ball, brethren.
Really have to shake hand?
Yeah, man, and no badness, brethren. Just live good, man.
I'm me, the style is no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress, you charge me to sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early? But Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
We're now inside of Global Leads Global Current, taking you through the top 3 global stories that you need to know. And story number 1 comes from Trinidad and Tobago. That country is reeling after the strangulation and death of a police officer inside a police station. Reporting out of Trinidad indicates that the case has also involved a major security breach and the theft of weapons and ammunition. 10 people are now in police custody, and the autopsy findings of Anusha Eversley, acting corporal, today has found that the officer was strangled. She also suffered other traumatic injuries. Let's take a listen to this report.
10 individuals have now been arrested in connection with the murder of WPC Anushka Eversley, who died by strangulation at the San Fernando Municipal Police Station on Sunday. On Monday, during a TTPS media briefing, Police Commissioner Alistair Guevara confirmed that 6 people had been detained. In an update in the Senate on Tuesday, Minister of Homeland Security Roger Alexander said that figure has now jumped to 10 detained since the murder on Sunday. The minister also provided an update on the recovery of dozens of stolen firearms and ammunition from the station.
That, according to the information from the Commissioner of Police, that 10 men, ages 16 to 33, are currently in police custody. We have made significant progress in the recovery of these stolen hardware, including 1 MPX submachine gun, 4 shotguns, 1 revolver, and 39 pistols. That includes also, Mr. President, 900 rounds of ammunition.
While noting that the investigation is at a sensitive stage, the minister reiterated that the police commissioner is enforcing stricter accountability measures for firearm storage to prevent any future breach.
That story coming out of Trinidad and Tobago, a horrific crime. It's not just a crime story. Because it happened to a police officer inside a police station, it's also a state capacity story. Because when a security installation, a police station itself becomes a site of vulnerability, the public is entitled to ask hard questions about control, command, and basic institutional security. Story number 2 is now from the United States, as the U.S. has now extended the ceasefire with Iran until an Iranian proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded. Now, that may offer a diplomatic space, but it doesn't erase the fact that the conflict has already disrupted the global oil market. We're now past day 50 in this conflict, and we're still not clear if Iran will send anybody to continue negotiations. But for Jamaica, this is a material issue. So we'll take a look at this report.
I told you there were a lot of developments today in the last 10 minutes since we just spoke. There was one more very big development. President Trump on Truth Social just wrote, based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured and upon the request of the Field Marshal of Pakistan and their Prime Minister, he says, quote, we have been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. I have therefore directed our military to continue the blockade and in all other respects remain ready and able. The president goes on to say, I will therefore extend the ceasefire until such a time as their proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded one way or the other, signed from the President of the United States. So there you have it. The ceasefire is extended indefinitely at this moment. We don't know until when, and we do not know in what form the negotiations will take place. As a reminder, when I just spoke with you, we saw from Iran state media that they said they are not going to go to Islamabad, Pakistan for those negotiations set to take place on Wednesday. And the ceasefire was looking to expire this evening at 7:50 p.m. Eastern. In light of all of that, we know the president has been gathered here today with some of his top deputies, including the vice president, the secretary of state, and the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, having conversations about what to do if Iran does not show up. Well, it seems that the U.S. has been talking with the Pakistani mediators, and as a result, the president is extending that ceasefire until a proposal is submitted and the discussions are concluded. Obviously, this raises a lot of questions about what does discussions concluded mean? An end to the war, a full firm deal, a signed deal? What does this all actually mean? Because the president says a blockade is going to continue, and the Iranians have said that blockade is part of the reason why they're not going to go to Islamabad to have any negotiations with the U.S. So
we had the discussion, breaking news on Friday, that the Strait of Hormuz had been opened. On Saturday, it had been closed. Iran saying that the United States continuing to blockade that area outside of its jurisdiction was now a reason it was not likely to speak with the U.S. Well, today on Tuesday, an extension of the ceasefire, according to the United States. Iran already sending home its children, saying learning from home is going to be what's happening here. But Lebanon, one of the key places in this ceasefire, has continued to be attacked by Israel, which is now going to mean that this ceasefire will have to hold, despite what the president says about Iran coming to the table, even if we don't see Israel, another part of this war started on February 28, acceding to those requests. For Jamaica, we have to look at fuel, freight, electricity costs, and they don't wait for diplomatic optimism, especially from overseas. They arrive when the market moves. Final story for you is an artificial intelligence story that might frighten you. But we've also been told, don't be frightened as well, because this is an intersection of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, and the question of who gets to control the most powerful tools ever built. On April 7th, the American artificial intelligence company Anthropic announced that it had developed a new model called Claude Mythos. It is, by its own assessment and by independent evaluation, the most capable AI system ever built. And Anthropic has decided not to release it to the public. The reason? During testing, Mythos demonstrated the ability to autonomously, that's by itself, find and exploit what are known as zero-day vulnerabilities. Those are previously undiscovered weaknesses across every major operating system and web browser. More in this BBC News report.
Claude Mythos, the latest AI model from Anthropic, is causing a big stir in the world of cybersecurity. According to the company, it's the equivalent of one of the best hackers in the world, able to find critical flaws, known as bugs, in all sorts of software and systems that are vital for modern life. The fear is, if this model gets into the wrong hands, or misbehaves, or goes rogue, it might lead to major data breaches or cyber attacks across many different industries. And it's the financial sector that's particularly concerned. However, a lot of this hype and fear has come from Anthropic itself. Critics argue this is part of a broader marketing strategy used by big tech to build excitement about the next AI models. The cybersecurity world has not been able to assess just how good Mythos is yet. But the UK's AI Security Institute has been given access to run some initial tests. It concluded that yes, this is a powerful model. But it also said that it only really works in undefended environments. Where you've got good cybersecurity, Mythos should be caught and stopped. Those researchers are advising people and companies not to panic. They say, make sure you're getting the basics of cybersecurity right, because most successful hacks don't need super AI. They can use simple things like phishing emails.
Well, are we in a supported and defended environment? For Jamaica and the Caribbean, this is a conversation that can't be deferred. Last week on this program, Minister Dr. Andrew Wheatley discussed Jamaica's AI readiness assessment. Christopher Record of the National AI Task Force has been inside lead story in recent weeks, and both conversations assumed a world where AI capability gaps between large and small states were manageable. Claude Mythos raises the question of whether that assumption is still valid and whether Caribbean digital infrastructure is even visible on the map of what projects looking into protecting against it are designed to protect. Now, tonight's program was really about two different kinds of risk. The first is a risk of misreading a moment. A confidence survey can tell you how people felt between January and March. It cannot, though, by itself, tell you whether April has already changed the terms of that recovery. That's why Jamaica must be careful not to mistake a lift in sentiment for the settlement of economic stress, because you might be under stress. The second is a risk of policy ambition without policy memory. Casinos are often sold as modernization, tourism, and investment. Sometimes they are. But states that govern well don't ask only what a certain policy can earn. They ask who benefits and who pays. Whether the regulatory state is actually strong enough to hold the line when the commercial pressure grows. And that is in the end the serious test of governance. Not whether you can announce a model, but whether it can govern its consequences. That is the story. Coming up next on Lead Story.